In 1274 BC, a young Egyptian pharaoh, Ramses II, led an army of 20,000 men against 40,000 soldiers from the Hittite Empire. I'm Matthew Settle. Both sides would fight one of the earliest recorded battles in history at Kadesh. At stake, the security and prosperity of Egypt. More than 3,000 years later, this is all that remains of the Syrian settlement where 60,000 men fought for their lives in the Battle of Kadesh. Now, with new video game technology, you are about to see this great battle as never before. The vast numbers of soldiers, the troop formations, how they fought, and how the battle was won. Get the view the generals wish they'd had. Now, on decisive battles. "3,000 years ago, in 1274 BC, Syria was the crossroads of the ancient world, where the trade routes from the west met those from the east. Timber, gold, and spices from the east were traded for copper and tin from the west.
Syria has been a battleground throughout most of its history. It's where three continents meet. It can't defend itself. It can't produce a big state of its own, but it's therefore always a target for the superpowers. To the south of them was the Egyptian superpower. To the north, the new superpower on the scene, the Hittites.
The city of Kadesh was on the borderland, where the Egyptian and the Hittite empires met.
Both Ramses and the Hittites want to take Kadesh. Kadesh is important because it actually controls trade routes over land. It allows access south if you're coming from the Hittites, or north if you're coming from Egypt.
For nearly 200 years, the Egyptians and the Hittites had fought for control of central Syria. The Hittites' power base was the Anatolian highlands of modern-day Turkey. Egypt was a desert kingdom, totally reliant on the fertile strip along the River Nile, which was maintained by annual floods.
Egypt was run by a sun king, a pharaoh who was a god upon earth. It was the first centralized state in history. On the whole, it was rather isolationist. It thought it knew best. Foreigners were inferior, but foreigners had to be kept in check.
In 1482 BC, Pharaoh Thutmose III had defeated the Hittites in the Great Battle of Megiddo. But most confrontations were on a much smaller scale, and massive military encounters like this were rare. Then in 1279 BC, the 25-year-old Ramses II was crowned Pharaoh of Egypt.
Ramses II is an absolutely fascinating character, and he left his mark up and down the Nile. He was a great one for carving his name into things, building monuments, leaving statues. We even have his body, so we feel that we know a lot about Ramses.
We know something of Ramses' physical appearance because his mummy has survived. He was tall for an ancient Egyptian, probably around 5'7", and he probably had red hair, the result of earlier intermarriage with Asian peoples.
To be pharaoh was absolutely the best job there was. It meant that you were a demigod. You weren't just a person. You were the richest man in the world. You were the most powerful man in the world.
Ramses had already had his share of military experience. As a very young crown prince, he had campaigned with his father, Seti, in Libya and Syria. Seti had captured the strategic city of Kadesh in Syria, but it had fallen back into the hands of the Hittites. Recapturing Kadesh would now show that he was a great commander, as great as his father, and would give him access to east and west trade routes.
Ramesses was a young man for whom the horizon had no frontiers at all. He decided, what Dad couldn't do, I will do. He was going to be it, and he had all the ambition of youth.
Ramesses II was a young man in a hurry. He wanted to be not merely a pharaoh, he wanted to be the greatest pharaoh there ever had been or ever would be. He wanted the gods to know that they had a super pharaoh on their hands.
The Hittite king, Muwatallis, he's not been on the throne that long himself. He gets enraged when Ramesses says that he's going to claim back Kadesh, which he regards as his own territory.
The father of Muwatalli and Ramses' father Seti had fought one another. Now both sons would settle their unfinished business. Muwatalli called for troops from all parts of his empire and produced one of the largest armies ever fielded by the Hittites. 2,500 chariots and 40,000 infantry.
What makes Kadesh, I think, very interesting in that we have two people who think that they can't be beaten coming up against each other.
Ramses' strategy would have come as no surprise. His plans to capture Kadesh were openly discussed at the Egyptian court.
If Ramses II had had primetime television, he would have gone on it and said, I intend to conquer Kadesh and kick the Hittites out of Syria.
I have no doubt that the news that came back from Egypt would also tell Muwatalli the character of the young king. This man's only 25, this man thinks he can do anything, this man is impetuous, this man's in a hurry, and Muwatalli might even been rubbing his hands saying, right, we know how to deal with this sort of sucker.
Campaigning always took place during the spring and summer, so that there was a ready supply of food for an army on the march. The armies of this period were built around infantry and chariots. Charioteers were like modern-day fighter pilots, the top guns of their time.
To be a chariot driver was a bit like being a test pilot or something like that. It was a job that people wanted. It had prestige, it could lead to great rewards, it attracted all the girls in the neighborhood.
They also had to supply and maintain their own chariots and horses. The chariot was a formidable assault weapon, designed to smash into and break through enemy infantry. It was also a mobile firing platform and carried a driver and an archer. The two main weapons of the charioteer were the spear, designed for close-up work once the chariot was amongst the enemy, and the composite bow.
We have an account